Dr. Power, you guess it all right.
Thank you, Bonnicastle. Hi, folks. Come in and have a seat. There's two more seats over here. Well, welcome. This is our third session going into week 3. Time is moving quickly, and again, I repeat my absolute delight with the way the discussions are going and the contributions, and everybody seems to be enjoying themselves, which is wonderful. And I sent you out the Robin Hood case. Just want to review that very quickly if I can. The way the course is designed, I have given you a couple of practice cases that are just yours. You sit and talk to your colleagues, have a glass of cheap red wine, kick the thoughts around, ask each other what thoughts they came up with, what models they're going to use, what tools they're going to use, and just sketch some things. Sketch a doodle maybe. And then that's your private information. And then on Friday of last week, I passed out I suggested my thoughts on the case that I thought you might just compare your notes and my notes, and I picked up on some and maybe missed some, and you got some that I didn't get. And so just have a look at these. But the idea is to grow slowly and is to learn how to do the case study and how to do some critical thinking, how to apply some tools. And the next one I think is the Sleeman case, a fascinating case on mergers and acquisitions, where a relatively young man starts out with the family pub in I think Guelph, Ontario, and his family, the Sleeman family, of course, were well known in the 30s, a good established brewery. Got tangled up in rum running and beer running into the States at that time, along with the Kennedys and Bronfmans and others who were doing it, and as a result lost his license. And one day, about 20 years ago, the grandmother of John Sleeman came into his pub, the story goes, and gave him the recipe for the beer and said, John, make us proud and get our name back. And so he did. He started producing that beer. And you know, Sleeman's is the only one in Canada that has the license to use the clear bottle. And so he started out, and without a lot of money, he used other people's money, but through mergers and acquisitions, he grew it from that little corner home brewery pub of his to the third largest in Canada. And with a strategy of being stealth mode below the radar, he allowed the companies that he acquired or merged with to carry on using their own names. So as you and I bought our beers off the shelf, we thought we're getting sort of the local, regional, provincial brewery beer, but really it was the third largest in Canada behind Molson's and Labatt's. And at the end of the day, he saw the writing on the wall that he could go no further on capturing market share because of Molson's and Labatt's had acquired about 95% of it. And so at that point, he stepped up and did a deal with Shapiro, a Japanese brewery, who took it over. But the point was he went from zero to a selling out price of $4 billion. Mergers and acquisitions work, but 75% of the time they fail. But when they work quite successfully. So we'll talk more about that in this course. We get to mergers and acquisitions, and there's a wonderful video for those interested. I did some consulting work with one of the credit unions. Well, 4 times I did mergers up island, and Shelley was the vice president at that time and in charge of these. And so we worked together with the board and with the senior management doing these mergers and acquisitions. And so she's been kind enough to share with us. On the site, you'll find a 30-minute video with Shelley McDade, who's now the CEO of Sunshine Credit Union, her thoughts on mergers and acquisitions. And so later on we get to that section. You may enjoy, if you're interested in that particular skill set and strategy for enhancing your basic 5 generic strategies that we'll be talking about as we move through the course. Next, this is week 3. In week 1, we looked at a strategist perspective, getting your head straight, some concepts and notions, and just nothing really to do necessarily with strategy, but just to get you to think in hopefully a different way with new mental models, prepared to look outside the box, to break free. And then in week 2, the week we're just wrapping up, I exposed you to a number of tools and models. The most important ones may be things like the SWOT analysis, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, but often what I find is many of you, and indeed some of my colleagues, have not heard of the TOES. And so you're absolutely necessary. The SWOT goes with the TOES. You take the data from the SWOT, the hard information, migrate it over into the TOES model, and then through reflective thinking, critical thinking, you start filling in the matrix in the TOES, and that leads you to your to the possible strategies, action plans, things you can do based on those 2 data sets that you pull from the SWOT. And then once you've done that, I often sit with my clients and say, okay, we've got 10 things in this quadrant. Now take your hat off as HR director and finance director and research and development director, and I want you to prioritize, shuffle these around to get them in the order that's the most important provide the most benefit to your organization. And so they shuffle them around for me. And now we have a shuffle list of 10 with priorities to them. Then I sit to each of them, we say, let's cost them. FTEs, bed spaces you need, computers you need, money you'll need, etc. And it comes to quite a large bill. At that point, you turn to the boss and ask he or she, how much money you got in your boss jeans? And the boss says, I got this amount of money. Well, it's easy. You draw your line down to this point number 2 or point number 3, and that's as much as you can undertake on those particular strategies. And so it's a wonderful tool, the two of them together. And also this week, you looked at the SMART, the simple multi-attribute rating technique, the idea of putting your options across the top. That could be market entry strategy, the countries across the top, the attributes important to you, key success factors and attributes important to you down the side, 5 or 7 of them. You weight them out of 100, and then go to each country and evaluate the country based on qualitative and quantitative data as to what numbers should go in there. And you give them out of 10, multiply the 2, get the number, and come to it. So now you've done your SMART. What's nice, but just as we did the SWOT and the TOES, you can take the SMART, the data in the SMART, and migrate it over to the strategic group map. You can take 2 of those attributes, they become your axis. You've got the numbers in your chart for those particular countries, and so you can take that over and draw little balloons in your strategic group map. And then you can also go back and do another SMART, say that's based on the data, the perspective today, but if I did that for 5 years down the road, would the numbers still be the same? Let's say for market entry strategy for China, if the rule of law was important to you and you rated them low on this SMART model, would you adjust that upwards if you think China's rule of law is going to get better over the next 5 years, where they get a higher valuation? And so these numbers change in the SMART, and if they change, that means the balloons you put over here 5 years out will change. And so you can see this adjustment and show your clients that this is what we look like today. Indeed, do one for 5 years past. Here's what we look like then, and then you can show them that sense of trend lines. And some companies just disappear, like Sears and those. And if you're doing businesses, Sears disappears. Anyway, good models. I hope you've enjoyed them. There's another 100 up on the bonus section if you're interested. But certainly those are among the important ones, along with the Porter's models are important. Have a look at them. What else is on my mind? Exams. I'll talk more about 2 or 3 times as we get closer to the exams, but let me say sufficient for today that it's closed book, that there's 2 parts to the exam, Part A and B. Part A is similar to what we do every day in the discussion sites. It'll be 6 questions, do 5. I expect time will be random. You've got 90 minutes to do 5 questions. You can do the math. My sense is that about a half a page, 3/4 of a page will be ample. And I might give you a Sun Tzu quote. When going into foreign lands, use local guides, or may give you a statement by Porter, or simply may say, no man is an island, discuss. And we'll all answer it differently. There's no wrong, right answers. What I'm looking for you is reflect critically on the statement or the passage or the question I've given you, and migrate that over to your perception of what's taken place, and you'll be fine. I'll talk more about it as we go through it. On the final, another 50% of the exam is a case study, which will be the same type of thing you've done on your individual case study. Here you've got the questions from me on the individual one. On the final exam, I'll give you the case 3 or 4 days ahead of the end of the course. Gives you the opportunity to talk to your colleagues as to what they think the questions might be, what tools they're going to use, what ideas emerge having read the case. And then on the exam, you'll get a copy of the case, I think PDF file style, still being sorted out. I don't fully understand it. But anyway, you'll get a copy of the case, and then on the exam, you'll answer I forget, 5 or 6 questions for a total of 50 marks, and you've got an hour and a half or so to put it in there. And that's your exam. So I say that trying to bring the temperature level down, that there's no reason every one of you can't pass this course with a good grade. It's not about memorizing 10 points, as I say on page 69. It's about internalizing, and you do that through these practice exercises and cases that we're going through. Deep learning will take place rather than surface learning. What else is on my little mind? Part of what we talked about last week, and a couple of raised the top, and I've suggested, I think the time has come in Canada for us to consider a flat tax and a guaranteed annual income. Might be a good conversation for this week, particularly in the light of the Internet of Things and the growing unemployment and the growing number of mental ill folks that are laying on the sidewalks. Those numbers are getting larger, and you only have to read the number of businesses and malls and things that are closing and layoffs that are taking place. Is going to be a huge problem with the Internet of Things. And if we're going to be a knowledge-based economy, Canada, then you and I and a few folks that have something between their ears, you'll do well. If you don't stay up, you don't continuously learn, you'll end up like the Montreal textile workers on the garbage heap, and that job will disappear. And so we cannot afford to have a large number of folks who are not taken care of. It'll bring all sorts of tension and turbulence to our environment. And so I think the time has come for Canada to consider first a flat tax, and it's being talked about in this next presidential election south of the border. It has been on many occasions before. A number of jurisdictions like Hong Kong, etc., have a flat tax, which basically is something like the first $30,000 you make, no tax whatsoever. Enjoy it. Over $30,000, we all pay the same flat tax. 15%, 18%, pick your number. And that's your tax. Whether you make $100,000 a year or $30,001, you'll pay the 18% income on the $1. And that gets rid of a whole bunch of people. It gets rid of my accountant, my bookkeeping, and on the list goes. A tax department, they closes down big time. Sure, make me happy. It certainly is time to consider a flat tax, but with that goes a guaranteed annual income. And that is the idea of saying every man, woman, and child gets $1,000. Family of four gets $4,000. That's a nice round number. And that everybody on the street, laying there on the sidewalks, gets $1,000, enough for a very basic food and a very basic share room somewhere, but get up off the street. And single mums and folks on welfare, etc., don't get clawed back. They can go out and work. But if we had a flat tax like that, where we, after the $30,000, you pay a tax on the portion, whatever it happens to be, but there's no penalty for people getting up and taking those part-time jobs and working at McDonald's if they have the basic $1,000, enhance it by another $1,000 or $2,000 doing some other job. And you say, how to pay for that? Well, I think it's time to do a cost-benefit analysis. I think if you just follow this along for a few minutes, if we took the guaranteed annual income and got rid of all the welfare departments, all the social assistance, all the student loans, all the old age CPP pensions, etc., etc., and all those government departments, you'd quickly find that by closing all that down, all those buildings down, etc., etc., it offsets the tax. But not quite sure, but I'd say it's worth a discussion. What do you think of a flat tax and/or a guaranteed annual income as part of the resolution, part of the remedial action we could take to resolve the what I believe is going to be a growing number of unemployed as a result of the Internet of Things? So we could talk about that. You have to bear with me today. I didn't bring my glasses, and so I'm struggling trying to read this. I see the Duffy matter is before the courts and it's going to drag on for probably a couple of months. We can get in or out, but I guess what's of interest to me in here is the Prime Minister's office. Nowhere in our Constitution is there provision for a Prime Minister's office, nor the authority that it has. But it has evolved over the period of time and flies in the face of our, when I say our Constitution, that collection of documents from the Treaty of New Westminster and the Bill of Rights and the Charter of Rights and the stare decisis precedent since the Magna Carta. Nowhere that's provided for, but yet the power is contained in the hand of a very few, mostly unelected, in the Prime Minister's office, as we see here. And so it's almost not a democracy, because the people we elect in this thing as backbenchers have very little say as to the direction the government is going, as we've seen recently on Harper's, what I consider to be frolic of his own in going into Syria and talking to Putin and talking to human rights to China. We've not had those discussions. But anyway, that comes up. And I guess part of the story from our friend Duffy is, at the end of the day, all you have to sell in your life will be your brand. You can make 25 years worth of work making your brand. All companies have to sell is their brand. And if you destroy that brand, if you tarnish it even within 15 seconds by doing something untoward, you can destroy 25 years of effort of trying to build that reputation. And Duffy appears to have done that, though the facts aren't in. In fairness, in our country, it may well be that we haven't heard the other side of the hand yet of what the story is about the PMO's office and its role and its involvement on forcing this $90,000. So we'll see some more as it unfolds. I was interested this week. I was reading that it's not in the paper this morning, but I think it was last night or yesterday. among other things, President Obama's computer system and journal was hacked by the Russians. And I think we have to be aware that when I joined the Army back in 1955, there were only 3 domains. That was for warfare: land, sea, and air. But the 3 more domains these days that we're running behind in. We're certainly, when I say we, I think consider Americans, we're ahead on land, sea, and air with our technology and our capacity and capabilities. I believe that to be true. But in the other 3 domains, we're not necessarily ahead. We're losing ground on them. Certainly the economic domain. There's economic warfare going on today as people jiggle for position to lever, move, have their currency properly positioned, their market share properly positioned. So there's economic warfare going on. There's cyber warfare, the type we've just talked about. And understand cyber warfare every day of the week. There's probing taking place. In the old days in the military, we sent patrols out to probe the front lines. Well, in cyber warfare, that's happening every day of the week. They're probing, looking for weakness in our electrical grid system, in our oil supply pipelines, etc. That on a moment's notice, either side can quickly do some things that will cause us a lot of disruption in our daily services that we've come to rely upon. That's certainly true. And of course, the final domain is in space. Whoever commands and controls 100 feet above your head with platforms, etc. That's very much where warfare is taking place today as we speak. And so we're good on the old traditional 3 domains, but on the new 3, emerging nations like China and Russia and India and others are quickly moving to adopt strong positions. And so we should look at that, and I appreciate your comments this morning about the 3 domains. What do you think of it? Ottawa hints about doubling TSFAs. I'm sure we all have them. I think it says here, if I can read it, there's $132 billion in savings right now in those. Something like 13 million people, 13 million people have a TSFA. It's a great saving instrument. And as you know, it's the idea that you put your money in and you pay tax on the money you put in, but after that it grows in there and you can take it out tax-free. It's a wonderful tool. But certainly with $132 billion in the banks now in savings, that's a wonderful thing for banks because it means more services, more products they can charge us for and provide to us. So it's stimulating and help growing the banks, even though we're watching saying it's helping us. It's helping the banking industry big time by enabling them to have savers put money in the bank so they have things to do with it. So that's of interest. And I guess the other thing that pops out of that is ask why now are they doing this? And of course the answer in part is the election's coming up. And so you'll see a lot of throwing stuff off the back of the truck this side of the election to win the hearts and minds of people with their money. And so that's heading our way. And while we're on the topic of money, I mean, it's that time of year we do our taxes. And I'd like us all to adopt a different mental model that the money is our money. It's not the tax department's money. So when they talk of TSFAs and tax cuts and things like that, well, they're not giving us money, they're just taking less of our money. And sometimes the tax department fails to understand that it is our money and we give it to them. Anyway, just a thought. We could talk a bit about that. Maybe I've got it wrong. New aluminum ion battery set to outlast the competition. Big breakthrough. Stanford University folks have found this long-lasting fast-charging battery. It's going to change, if true and comes to pass, it's going to change a great way to store energy and battery. It's going to change for electric cars. It's going to make them more viable. There's wonderful things happening there. And so we could be looking at this new battery coming out, and the so what, of course, in that for us folks that try to make some money off business is going to put a great demand for aluminum. And so companies like Canadian companies, Alcan, should do well as they start producing this aluminum. I don't know what the volume would be, but it seems these days batteries are running everything, and so I suspect the demand for the commodity aluminum will go up. It should be worth looking at. Oh yeah. Ottawa, no rush to convert proceeds from General Motors share sell-off. And you recall they're selling off about, give or take, $3 billion worth of General Motors shares that they acquired, and it's going to balance the budget. Well, on its face, that seems right. But let's go back and ask ourselves for a few minutes, where did this money come from that went to General Motors? And it was quantitative easing. So it's not a windfall. We're simply getting money that we printed to give them. We're getting it back into the system, and we're using it to reduce our deficit, which means we're spending it rather than getting rid of it, burning it, taking it back out of the system. And so that, and the other part of that is, I'm not sure we got all our money back. We're patting ourselves on the back that we got the last dollar back out of General Motors. But my question is, of the money borrowed, this is the last of the shares we can sell. But I think we're still in the hole. I haven't got the answer to that, but somewhere in my back of my head, I have a sense that we gave them more than we got back. And the third thing I might make as an observation is, I think most of us will agree that General Motors shares, Ford shares, Chrysler shares have been doing well since the crash in 2008. And as an investor, I'm not sure I want to sell my holdings in General Motors at this point. Why don't we let the shares run a little bit? Just an observation. And of course, if you take $3 billion and you fire it into our economy, we get $3 billion. These are American shares. That's $3 billion American coming in that we want to convert for Canada to put back into our budget. So you're going to convert $3 billion US into a little more over $3 billion Canadian. That's a demand-supply curve. Demand for Canadian dollar is going to happen in a very short span of time. So it leads me to believe that if I wanted to invest in the Canadian dollar in the next month or two, we'll see the Canadian dollar go from the high 70s into the low 80s as a direct result of this injection of American dollars into our system. $3 billion is a lot of money for our system, but could be wrong. Let's see what else is in here. I hope you're enjoying these sessions as much as I am. Nice picture. You can't see it, but a picture of white snow cap and some freighters going across what appears to be a lake. It is a lake. It's Whitefish Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and it's the biggest ice cover in the Great Lakes in decades, and it's backing up all the shipment of Canadian grain and U.S. iron and steel to get through those Great Lakes. There's just so much ice packed, and it's hindering the shipping. And it leads me to talk about climate change and global warming and all that stuff Gore talks about, and be a good topic for conversation this week, because I'm one of those on the other side, the extremists that suggest that certainly there is climate change, but to me it's the ebb and flow that comes and goes like tides, as opposed to the carbon that our footprint on the earth. But I could be wrong, but I've got evidence for mine. I'm sure others have evidence the other side. But be a wonderful, interesting discussion this week as to what you think of climate change and global warming, and have we been sold a bill of goods as we start buying into tax credits that make other people rich. Rand Paul is entering the 2006 U.S. presidential election. I confess, I like Rand Paul. I liked his dad. But for the first time in a long time, America, if Paul gets the nomination, Americans will have a clear choice between the hard left, Plato, where you have Hillary over there, but even farther to her left is Elizabeth Warren, who's standing in the wings. And if Hillary thunders in because of Benghazi and some other things, Hillary may well be the nominee for America. And she's bright, articulate, has come up the hard way, lawyer, prosecutor. Frankly, I like her. She's got a lot going for her. But what scares me is that she is so far to the left. You'll see that commanding height shift even farther over to the socialist side of the house, progressive socialism. And so it scares me. On the other side, you get Rand Paul, who's the far end of the other side, on the Aristotle, libertarian, out of the way, less government, don't interfere with my civil liberties. All those things you think of when you think of a Texan, Rand Paul exemplifies. But he's also a ophthalmologist, eye surgeon, which is pretty talented. At times I wonder what he's doing, giving up that profession, which must be in the millions of salary, to run for president. But nevertheless, he is. But we could talk a little bit, because it'll make a big difference to us, whether we have Aristotle perspective for a particular ideology in the States versus a Warren view of how the country should be run up here. It'll make a difference on how we do business with America. So we should look at that and give it some consideration, and then prepare, because the election will be up in 18 months, and we should be preparing for it. Another article in here that Harper's talking about splitting the income tax. I think we talked about that last week for folks. But that's just another indication of throwing money off the back of the truck with the election coming. There'll be a lot of that coming out to make us all happy. In this section, more on the TSFASC. Oh, Bell, the service provider for your phone, is taking off it had a process of tracking all our internet conversations and phone conversations and selling that to third parties. And now they're going to have to stop that, because thank heavens our privacy commissioner has stepped in and said that's a no-no, stop it. And so that's what's happened. A global glut threatens BC's LNG projects, LNG, and Moody's say that there's going to be many LNG industries starting up. They're going to have to close down because the price of the gas just doesn't support all the construction that's underway, much like the oil industry. So that's going to impact BC in our budget. We could look at that and force people to tighten down a little bit. Yeah, two mergers and acquisitions. FedEx agrees to acquire TNT Express, and Royal Dutch Shell aims to buy BG Group. And I say that's mergers and acquisitions. We're going to cover that in some depth, and it's a wonderful tool, but you have to be a skilled practitioner so you don't get knocked out of the box. But we spend some time with that in this course, so you'll have the appropriate tools to deal with it. Oh yeah, I don't know the man, but Loblaws, the fellow PILLA, is paid $25.5 million on leaving Loblaw. The same story we had last week with these senior executives living in rarefied air. That's a nice paycheck, $25.5 million leaving Loblaw at the same time that the mainly women sitting on the cash registers are making what they make. There's need to reset this because there comes a certain point as this trajectory grows between the folks that aren't making as much and the top 1, 2, 3% that are making it. That dissatisfaction, as it grows, it can get out of hand. And so it's better that we voluntarily look at these sort of issues and try to find some solutions as leaders in your business and industry. It's better to be proactive than reactive. It's coming. The Chinese solar panels won't face Australian tax. And here we have a situation that the Chinese made a conscious decision to build 5 pillars to take the world's lead in these. And the automobile industry is another one, and solar was one. And as a result, by putting money, government money, in the way they sovereign wealth funds, they have grown their solar industry, and it is among the best in the world. And it's very efficient. And they do it at a budget price. And so now they're offering their products out in the world. And so Australia says, no problem, we'll take it because it's the best interest of our consumer to get cheap solar power panels so we can have cheap electricity and drive our engines, et cetera, et cetera. Canada's taken the other approach and said, no, we want to tax you. And I think the number is ranging from 9% to 202% on 9 specific Chinese panel exporters. So we're going to charge them, put a barrier up, a tariff, notwithstanding World Trade Organization. We're going to barrier, we're going back to mercantilism. Don't bring your solar power panels in here. We want to pay more for our panels because they're Canadian suppliers. And so there's an argument on both sides. If you have an incubator industry like solar, maybe there's an argument for government to put this protective barrier up around the little industry to help it get up and flourish, and maybe it needs 5 years or 10 years to get up off the ground. Certainly you don't want it to morph into the Egg Marketing Board or the Milk Board and for 50 years have this barrier and tariff up there because the consumer loses on those deals. So that's one argument. We could say, no, it's to protect our homegrown industry. We need time to get up and off the ground. And I think there's some merit to the argument, and maybe 5 or 10 years might be the appropriate time. But understand, at the end of the day, the one who loses on this is the consumer. We'll pay more for the project than we have to if we can't use the solar power panels from China on our rooftops. And it makes a difference whether it's with BC Hydro and back into the grid, whether it's the tipping point, whether it's the right cost structure for us to be able to do it. With Chinese solar power panels, I suspect pretty well all of us would migrate over to the solar power and get off BC electricity off the grid a little bit more, and that would free up the seaside dam that they're flooding the best land in BC up north on First Nations land and farmland. It would reduce less flooding would be necessary. So there's a lot in here that both solar power panels, which is a symptom, but the larger thing is this idea of tariffs and barriers to trade and consumers losing versus the need to embryo little businesses to help them out. We could have a discussion with that this week. And on my last little paper here, the Compass Card TransLink. Yeah, this is the Internet of Things. In British Columbia, we have the BC Transit, and they're now introducing a smart card to track not just on and off the bus, but everywhere you go and what time you get on, et cetera, and they will gather some more data about us for the Internet of Things database. There's a pot boon in Nanaimo. I think it says here that the Economic Development Corporation says medical marijuana operation in Nanaimo City is the 6th biggest employer, so it's doing very well up there. In fact, we had in Canada, I recall reading back in 1972, the Ledane Commission. That was a judge in Canada, well respected, and he brought out a report, evidence-based, etc., that marijuana used appropriately was less dangerous than alcohol. And we seem again to be man is born free, at everywhere is in chains, and here once again we're saying that you and I can't grow this in our backyard for arthritis, whatever our purposes are, but instead it's got to be classified into 3 tiers according to the government, and they're keeping pretty tight rein on that. What do you think? Your comments? What else here? Oh, the Japanese radiation. We had the the tsunami in Japan in 2011. Couldn't be that for long ago. Anyway, this maybe 2013, had the tsunami across there, and all the wash, the radioactivity, etc., is migrating, coming its way across, and it's now landing on the BC island shoreline, Tofino and places like that, and Hideaway. And so the University of Victoria has got their people monitoring the radiation level. And I guess the good news is that radioactivity, the good news is that the levels are so low, they appear not to pose a threat. The bad news is the main wave of this will not arrive till next year, so we won't know till next year the extent of this radioactivity. But currently they assure us that we can eat and drink this stuff and it won't hurt us. And we can talk a bit about that. Well, Hideaway likely to see the big earthquake and a tsunami, and of course in BC we live on the Juan de Fuca plates, part of the Ring of Fire. We have 2 plates pushing, in fact one going under the other, and the recent earthquake they had, there was quite a major in 2012, quite a major earthquake they had, built up more pressure, so the people studying it are saying that it's getting ready, that it's quite serious, and we never know. It could happen in the middle of the night tonight, it could happen 10 years from now or 20 years from now. But my point, I guess I pull out of this story for us, is the need for you and your business and your home to have a pandemic plan and a earthquake kit, etc., so that if this happens, your business, you've got some plan, because it was pandemics, Ebola, etc., our hospitals can't cover that. You have to be able to last on your own, whether it be earthquakes or pandemics. And so maybe this week we could talk about the need for us to be a little more aware of developing these plans for our business and for our homes. This is one near and dear to my heart. Seniors are over-medicated, Advocate finds. I think every night I'm over-medicated. In any event, they're talking in here about much of the medication given, particularly seniors in assisted living. They're really drugging them out, and to the point that they're getting concerned that there's just too much of these drugs being passed to people, just to keep them calm and mellow and not talking much, I suppose. And so we have to look at that, and we also have to question the role of Big Pharma in this, and you know, are people being rewarded for writing prescriptions? Certainly that was the day you had pharmaceutical salesmen who religiously came by to your family doctor, and he would have the printout of how many scripts your doctor wrote, not your name, but how many scripts they wrote in the run of the month. And then for that there would be, not directly linked, but there was no secret, there were rewards. There was free golf games, free meals, free trips, free conventions, things to help reciprocate for the doctor paying attention to your drug. And so my concern today is the role of Big Pharma and the, I mean, I grew up, we had simple things. I remember a piece of camphor in a bag around my neck that used to ward off the evil spirits when I was a youngster. Have a camphor bag. Aspirins were a big thing. Maybe miner's limit for strains. And iodine, if you got a cut, you slather on some red iodine, and that was, the medicine cabinet wasn't full. Today, it's overstocked with stuff. We have just too many drugs, and I think that contributes to our health. So we could talk a little bit about Big Pharma and medicines today. It'd be interesting, and the opportunities they may or may not present. I like this story from Loblaws. I'm one of those that believe in this, that we throw out over $100 billion worth of farm produce, apples that have a blemish, a pear that is a blemish. And Loblaws, bless their heart, have said enough of that. We're going to bag it and especially identify it as seconds, but you get it 30% cheaper. And so I support that. I mean, an apple's an apple. We're so fussy these days. You go into the store, we want only the apple without the blemish, the best, the shiniest, and we pay for that. But to get that one apple, we're discarding 5 apples. Potatoes the same way. The potatoes, when they come in on the conveyor belt, there are people standing there who just take out the bad potatoes and throw them in another bag to feed the hogs, but only the best potatoes go through the line. Well, as an Irishman who loves his potatoes, all the potatoes are good. You're going to peel them anyway. And so I love this story about the imperfect produce. I think that's a very valuable thing, and I give kudos to Loblaws for saying let's package it up and let's sell it. And like your thoughts on that. And I guess that's most of the highlights for this week. Well, I hope you're enjoying these little sessions. I certainly am, and look forward to our time together. I encourage you to call to say hello anytime you want. I'm there for you, generally from 10 in the morning till 5 or 6 at night, and on the weekends from lunchtime till maybe 5 or maybe 5 at night. Give us a call. Just want to chat, say hello, any questions. In any event, enjoy the course. I'm here for you. Have fun. Bye-bye.